The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, it's a nice, bright, sunny Tuesday morning here in West Berkshire. It's the first time we've touched West Berkshire on TVI, and I'm hoping the village that we're about to walk around here is exactly the same as this beautiful day. This is the first of the Ilsley twins. It's East Ilsley. East Ilsley, Hills Clearing East. Hello Berkshire, it's been a little while since I set foot in this county. The last time I did, I was in Eton, admiring Windsor Castle from the banks of the River Thames. That was nearly 3 years ago, can you believe that? Windsor and Eton are very urbanised parts of Berkshire, and because of that we haven't yet seen what the county is really like. We will this week. This is the district of West Berkshire, which is a completely different animal. There are 63 parishes in this, making it the largest in the county in terms of number, and there's some tiny ones among them. We've got a couple of tiddlers to see at the end of the week, but let's get the ball rolling with a decent sized one. This is East Ilsley. This one lies on the A34 north of Newbury in an area known as the Berkshire Downs. The vast majority of its buildings are within a traditional clustered centre. Anciently, this was called Hildersley, deriving from Hild or Hilda's clearing. It was recorded as Hildersley in the Domesday Book, and both East and West Ilsley back then were one entity. Now they're two separate parishes and they'll both get their own videos. Quite a number of notable figures have lived in East Ilsley down the years. Two of them caught my attention straight away. One is Hugh Morrison, who trains racehorses here, and the other was a man who was involved in a different kind of racing. Being so close to Grove in Oxfordshire, East Ilsley was perhaps an ideal residence for a man who founded a Formula One team, Williams Racing. None other than Sir Frank Williams lived in the old rectory. Let's see where that is, and so much more besides. It's walk time. Welcome to East Ilsley. Our route around this lovely Berkshire village starts on Fiddler's Lane, not far from the busy A34 that flashes past to the west. Believe it or not, East Ilsley was once a market village. That's why it was alternatively known sometimes as Chipping Ilsley or Market Ilsley. It was officially granted the right to hold a sheep fair in 1620, but one had been informally held here since the reign of Henry II. It was a big deal in the 19th century. In fact, it was so important that it became the second largest sheep fair in the country after Smithfield. Shepherds and drovers would drive their sheep to the village and stay overnight in one of East Ilsley's pubs until the fair was held the following morning. There were once, get this, somewhere between 12 and 24 pubs in East Ilsley. There are no longer that many, but there are still two, the Crown and Horns and the Swan. The Swan is a former 17th century coaching inn in much the same way as many of the others here were. They all served a former coaching route between Oxford and Newbury, which was an important way to Winchester. It later became the A34, which bypasses the village today. Rather unsurprisingly then, beer was in demand in these parts and there were some local breweries. One of them was Moreland's Brewery, which started in West Ilsley. The Swan was the first pub in what became the Moreland's chain, which has since been taken over by Green King. Moreland's was one of the best known pub chains in Berkshire and Oxfordshire. Its pubs displayed the logo of an artist in a frock coat and hat, carrying a pallet of brushes. The Crown and Horns dates back to the 19th century. It's a beautiful country inn with heaps of character and history. It offers a traditional pub fare in terms of food, and it has some 11 ensuite rooms for those of you looking to stay in the area. Of course, way back when, those rooms would have been used by the sheep drovers. The prosperity of the village inns owes a lot to both the coaching route and the sheep fair. Without them both, East Ilsley may not have had any pubs at all. So it was a little bit hard to believe that there were so many pubs in this place. I found a couple of sources which said a differing number. One said 12, another one said 24, but we can just assume it was somewhere between those two figures. There's certainly not as many as that these days. Okay, let's continue down this street, which would have been, one would have thought, the main road through the place from north to south before the A34 came along. Let's see what else we can find up here of interest. It's hard to imagine just how important the sheep fair was to East Ilsley, but the village has always had quite a prominence as a trading hub. That started back in the 13th century when the main focus was on corn and later wool. That's what would eventually lead to it receiving the royal charter from James I in 1620. The chief fair took place annually on the 1st of August, but they were otherwise held on a bi-weekly basis and saw up to 80,000 sheep sold in a single day. At its peak, some 400,000 changed hands. By 1909, these incredible numbers had reduced to about 10,000 due to the agricultural depression. Okay, so now we have a picture of the agricultural and economic history of the village. Let's talk a bit more about its religious status. There are 3 main religious buildings here, but only 2 of them are active. This is St Patrick's Church, which is part of the Thames Isis pastoral area of the Catholic Diocese of Portsmouth. St Patrick's Church came into existence in 1947 thanks to the determination, tenacity and hard work of local Catholics who strongly felt that a church was needed to provide mass for those in the local horse racing community. With a donation of land and help from other Christian denominations in the area, the church was converted from a derelict 250-year-old barn at the cost of £600. It was so grand that Bishop King of Portsmouth called it a basilica. It's quite the building in terms of decoration. The Stations of the Cross were painted by a local artist, and its 2 stained glass windows, one dedicated to St Patrick and the other in memory of Father Bushell, were created by Margaret Gallagher, who also painted the beautiful murals behind the altar depicting the Annunciation and the Visitation. Okay, so now we have a long stretch between that church and the Millennium Green, located at the southernmost extent of East Ilsley. This gives us an opportunity, whilst there isn't much of note around us, to mention the Battle of Ashdown. There is a theory that says Ilsley means battle clearing as opposed to hills clearing. If it does, it may explain why historians have argued for a long time that the Ilsley villages were the location of the battle, but nobody knows for certain where it took place. As well as in Ilsley, other possible locations for its occurrence include Kingstanding Hill, elsewhere in Berkshire, or somewhere near Starville, north of Aldworth. The battle was part of a large conflict between the West Saxons and the Danish Vikings, which lasted several years. It was fought on January the 8th, 871 AD, and marked Alfred the Great's victory against the Danes. His success was a notable one because it was rare for the West Saxons to register any sort of victory against their Danish foes. The Saxons' victory at Ashdown may have made the Danish leader, Halfdan, more cautious about his future plans for Wessex. Now, speaking of the name Ashdown, it's a relevant part of this next thing, the Millennium Green. Now, if you keep walking down the road that we've just been ambling down, you'll get back onto the A34 because it joins together, it merges together. But we're not going that way because that will take us onto the road, and we've still got quite a lot of village to cover yet. The next thing to do is to go onto this green. This is the East Ilsley Millennium Green, and there's a few rocks on this which you might be able to see in the distance over there. Now, they've got an interesting story. This is one of over 250 Millennium Greens countrywide which were set up to mark the turn of the 21st century. The land itself is on a 999-year lease and it can't be built upon. It's looked after by the Millennium Green Trust and its elected trustees. The green was created following the efforts of a group of local inhabitants and some soldiers too. On a cold, damp morning towards the end of 1999, about a dozen soldiers from the 42 Survey Engineering Group, Hermitage, arrived at the open area which was later to become the Millennium Green. They were armed with lorries, low loaders and equipment necessary for moving very heavy loads. They'd collected 34 large sarsen stones from a field close to Ashdown House between Lambourne and Ashbury. They proceeded to put them into positions around the green under the direction of the trustees. The placing of the stones wasn't random. The two large stones at the entrance were specifically spaced to prevent vehicular access, and a group on the path to the left were arranged around a central stone so that children could sit around a teacher. Rather lovably, the stones today are all collectively known as Ilsley Stonehenge. Between the two Ilsley villages there's only one school, and this is it. October 2008 marked the centenary of the Ilsley School in its present location, but there have been schools in the village since the early 19th century. Initially, these were private schools catering for those who could afford to pay. Later, schools were opened to provide elementary education for the village children. The first known school in the Ilsleys was Legg's Academy, which operated from Ilsley Hall. It was designed for the tuition of young gentlemen and began in January 1806. In 1812, Mr. Legg gave notice that he was taking over Greenham School near Newbury, and the hall then ceased to be an educational establishment. Other private education establishments existed at Kennet House in Abingdon Lane and in Broad Street, until in 1832 another school was built by Reverend Thomas Loveday. It was a national day and Sunday school with places for 100 children. The building was of brick and stood on the road to Compton. In 1872 it was converted into a board school. It was then replaced by this in 1908 on some high ground behind the church. This was built to reduce the problems of damp that plagued the old school, but it raised new problems because of its exposed position. On several occasions, windows were blown in for a start. In 1966, children from West Ilsley joined the school after the closure of their own. Yeah, I couldn't get a lot of the school there because there were some children in the playground, and I have a policy: if there are children in the playground, you don't point the camera straight at them. I was trying to be as careful as I could there. Don't think I caught anybody, which is a good thing. Now, the next thing on this route is the church, which you can see behind me. We're going to walk all the way around this because there's a gate on the other side. We'll go in and have a little explore if it's open too. East Ilsley's church, dedicated to St Mary, stands on a very prominent hill. Some believe the first church built here was the same one that was recorded by Robert of Gloucester. If it was, it gives a bit of credence to the Battle of Ashdown's location being here. Apparently it was erected by King Canute in memory of those who fell on both sides around a single thorn tree. If not, the Ilsley site was still probably an ancient pagan place of worship, so a sacred tree is quite likely to have stood here anyway. The nave of the present building dates from the 12th century, as does the unusual 9-sided font inside. This little two-cell structure was given to the Knights Templar by King John in 1199. The warrior monks largely rebuilt the place in around 1240, replacing the chancel and adding the south aisle. The tower was built on the end of the nave in the 14th century, but the north aisle only dates from 1845. There are some interesting old carvings here, including a devil with a man's soul in his mouth. A brass to the wife of William Hildersley has unfortunately lost its figured subject, but the inscription is still of interest as it commemorates a member of the great sheep-farming Ilsley family who owned the manor here for many generations. They have an even older brass in East Hendred Church. Descendants of the Ilsley family can be found all over the world. Now, if I didn't know better, I'd say the building that's currently behind me there is probably an old pub, one of the 12 or 24 or somewhere in between in East Ilsley. There's a sign there that says something about spirituous liquors. Could well be, I don't know, but we'll walk past it anyway, because now we're heading for Broad Street. So we're going down a shallow hill and down into what is the main centre of East Ilsley. At the bottom of this road there's a pond, which we'll be able to get a good look at in a moment, but it's Broad Street first, and that's off to the right down there. After a lengthy little walk to Compton Road, we next have the third and final religious building in the village, the former East Ilsley Baptist Chapel. Built in 1864, this served the village until its closure in 2012 and was later converted into a dwelling. It's now a handsome little two-bedroom property. As nice as the chapel is, it's not the main focal point in this area. There are two water features which can instead claim that honour. This is the East Ilsley Well. In the Berkshire Downs, as in many other parts of the country, wells were the primary source of water until the 20th century, with households relying on them for their water supply. They were reliable for the most part, but in dry seasons they could dry up, and that's sort of why this structure is here on the green. In the summer of 1932, there was a particularly bad drought. What you're looking at here is not a true well, therefore. Instead, it's actually a water pump, and it was installed to prevent the village's water supply totally drying up in those hot summer months. It's connected to a borehole deep below the ground. Nowadays, of course, the village has piped water, so the well is obsolete. Nonetheless, it's still a brilliant little feature, isn't it? The well is right next to a pretty big pond, and this too was a water supply at one time. However, this wasn't used by humans, instead it was used by all those sheep that once descended upon East Ilsley. With no other watercourses in the village, the pond was a vital place for watering of stock. The pond also served as the drainage for the roads, as it lies at the lowest part of the village. Nowadays, its prime function is for flood alleviation, as well as being a green space for everyone to enjoy. In earlier times, the pond was a fairly shallow and muddy affair, and its banks merged with the roads around it, which were little more than dirt tracks. As such, it was probably quite smelly. With the increasing motor traffic by the mid-1960s, the pond was getting very polluted from the runoff from the roads. There was some discussion at that time as to whether it would be best to fill in the pond and just have a grassy area. Happily, that never happened, and it was decided to carry out the first of several projects to dredge out the excess silt and plant vegetation to make it more of an amenity. It's now managed by a local group called the Pond Watch, who are based at Hildersley Court. Well, I have to say, people, that pond is absolutely beautiful, and I could sit there all day watching the ducks swimming around, but of course we have to move on. Now, one man who I bet enjoyed that pond just like I did lived, or used to live, in the building you can see there. Now, that is the old rectory. Now, who might have lived in a house like that? Let's find out. Now, East Ilsley has had a number of well-known people live within it over the centuries. One of them was John Hildersley, the head of a Dominican order, a former Bishop of Rochester, and an agent of Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. He was born here too. Another was Richard Whitewick, the co-founder of Pembroke College, Oxford. One name, though, that stood out to me more than any other when I researched East Ilsley was Sir Frank Williams, the founder of Williams Grand Prix Engineering. He lived here in the old rectory, and it was just one of the many homes he had during his lifetime. With Williams based at Grove in Oxfordshire, which isn't too far away from where we are right now, this was probably an ideal place for him to live. Sir Frank Williams is a name known by many a motor racing fan, but I am aware that not everyone will know who I'm talking about. Here's a bit more about the F1 legend himself. Sir Frank Williams, CBE, was a British businessman, motorsport executive and racing driver. From 1977 to 2020, Williams served as team principal and co-owner of the Williams Formula One team. He won 9 World Constructors' Championship titles between 1980 and 1997. A lot of people will remember him as being wheelchair-bound. He had been ever since a car accident in the south of France in 1986, which rendered him tetraplegic. Williams required constant care and physical dependence on others as a consequence of the accident. Williams was born in South Shields, County Durham. At the time, his father served as an active RAF officer, while his mother worked as a school teacher. Williams was partly raised by his aunt and uncle in Jarrow after the breakdown of his parents' marriage. He subsequently spent much of his later childhood at a private boarding school, St Joseph's College in Dumfries. In the late 1950s, a friend gave Williams a ride in his Jaguar XK150, which immediately served to catalyse his interest in fast cars. After a brief career as a driver and mechanic, Williams founded Frank Williams Racing Cars in 1966, funded by his work as a travelling grocery salesman. He ran drivers for several years in Formula 2 and Formula 3. By 1969, he'd purchased a Brabham Formula One chassis, which his driver, Piers Courage, drove throughout that year's Formula One season, twice finishing in second place. 1972 saw the first F1 car built by the Williams Works. It was the Polintois FX3 that was designed by Len Bailey. It didn't last that long. It was crashed and destroyed in its very first race. In 1977, along with fellow F1 legend Patrick Head, he acquired an empty carpet warehouse in Didcot and announced the formation of Williams Grand Prix Engineering. This would be a new team to compete in Formula One. Their first Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship both came in 1980, with the Australian Alan Jones winning the Drivers' title. Between 1981 and 1997, the team won 6 more Drivers' Championships, including the titles for Damon Hill in 96 and Jacques Villeneuve in 97. Frank Williams himself personally oversaw the team claim a total of 114 Grand Prix victories. In May 1994, following the death of Ayrton Senna at Imola, Williams was charged with manslaughter in Italy but was acquitted in 1997. Since 1995, every Williams chassis carried a tribute in the form of a small Senna logo on its front wing supports or nearby. In 2012, Williams announced he would be stepping down from the team's board of directors and would be replaced by his daughter Claire. He ceased to have any involvement with the Williams team when it was sold in September 2020. Elite motorsport is an ever-changing landscape, but Williams are, of course, still going in F1. Williams was admitted to hospital in Surrey in November 2021 and died 2 days later at the age of 79. Sir Frank Williams was one of the kindest people you could ever wish to meet in the world of motorsport. What he achieved in F1 was something truly special. His legacy will live on forever. Those aren't my words. They came from a fellow F1 legend following Williams' death, Sir Lewis Hamilton. Across the road from the rectory is Hildersley Court. This takes its name from the ancient name for East Ilsley that was recorded in the Domesday Book. The court is a residential complex designed for retired folk. It's hard to imagine a more quintessentially English scene than this pretty estate, seeing as it's located alongside the pond and nestles under the delightful Church of St Mary's. Its collection of 2- and 3-bedroom cottages sit around a shared garden square, though each has its own small private garden too. There are also several attractive corner apartments here as well. The whole estate is sheltered in a dip in the hills, and it's south-facing with a pond and fountain, and that's a sun trap which its residents thoroughly enjoy. Now, Sir Frank Williams isn't the only man associated with racing to have a connection to East Ilsley. Our last landmark on the walk is to do with a different kind of racing: horses as opposed to cars. The Ilsley villages are right in the heart of horse racing country. We are, after all, only a stone's throw away here from Newbury Racecourse. Racehorses have been trained at East Ilsley for about 200 years as an offshoot from the economic centre of training located 10 miles away at Lambourne. At these stables, named Summerdown, the Honourable Hughie Morrison trains them. Morrison is the younger son of James Morrison, the 2nd Baron Margadale, and his wife Claire Berkeley. His elder brother is Alistair Morrison, the 3rd Baron Margadale. He was educated at Eton. He was advised by the trainer Henry Cecil to see life outside racing before training, and initially worked in the pharmaceutical industry and ran a lighting company in Manchester. He began training horses in 1997, having bought the stables at East Ilsley the previous September, after a 2-year period as assistant trainer to Paul Cole. His first major success came in national hunt racing, but he subsequently concentrated on flat racing. In February 2022, Morrison trained his 1000th winner. Now, these are not the only stables we'll see this week. Tomorrow we'll be talking about some more. It's also worth a mention too that at Keats Gore, a mansion which is near East Ilsley, the celebrated racehorse Eclipse was foaled in 1764 and afterwards trained. He was later moved to Cannons Park near Edgware. Okay, we're pretty much all the way around East Ilsley, but don't forget, this is one of a set of twins. There are 2 Ilsley villages. We have yet to see the other one. Come back tomorrow and you might just find it here on YouTube. And that's it for East Ilsley, but we haven't quite finished with the Ilsley villages just yet. East is only half the story here. Tomorrow we're going to see its neighbour, and we'll learn a bit more about why East Ilsley doesn't have a village hall. We'll also get a look at the oldest road in Britain. See you there. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.